I've seen enough. If it's one thing that TCU's loss to Utah proved, is that the two games prior were nothing more than a mirage. Oh, yeah, it's locked on Horned Frogs. Play my music.
You are Locked On Horned Frogs, your daily podcast on the TCU Horned Frogs. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's going on, family? I'm Darrion Gray, a.k.a. the Mouth of the South, host of the Locked On Horned Frogs podcast, your number one. Daily one-stop shop for everything TCU athletics, Monday through Friday. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. The college football playoff is here, and FanDuel is the best place to get in on the action all playoff long. So visit FanDuel.com to get your college football playoff profit boost every game day. Mind you, today, Monday, is the final game of the college football playoff. We close out today's episode sticking with TCU. We're going to keep it in Fort Worth. It is a pivotal matchup on the horizon for both the women's and men's basketball team. Today is the day for women versus Ohio State. And then Tuesday is a different OSU, but it's the men versus Oklahoma State. Speaking of the women's game versus the Buckeyes, I think protecting the ball is going to be priority number one, especially because it's something they have struggled with recently. But let's kick this thing off with the men because I'm absolutely disappointed. I don't think that this game versus Utah, this loss to Utah, was just disappointing. I think it was also revealing because it revealed that the two games prior to this against top 25 opponents was nothing more than a mirage. If you were going to pull any optimism from close losses to BYU and Arizona, I advise you to stop. I feel if this game didn't make you stop, please let this show tell you to stop. This is not this is not an indication that TCU is closer to Utah than they are BYU. But I'll tell you this, the best you could hope for is that you're right in the middle, because I do not believe that you are closer to BYU. Right? I don't believe that. It's not an indication. It's not going to be a surefire, concrete description. But what you've done over the last 4 games certainly feels like a team that has no business being discussed with the top tier teams. I don't mean you're a top tier team or not. I mean, don't even put them next to them. Don't even put them in that second tier. And I feel like the last 2 games before the Utah matchup, that's where it felt like it was trending. It began to feel like TCU isn't a top tier team. We won't become delusional and say that, but they are a squad that on the right day could get one of these top tier teams. I'm not here to tell you that still can't happen, but the confidence in it happening has dropped significantly. And the only reason I won't say that it can't happen is because you did beat Florida earlier in the season. During the out-of-conference schedule, you beat Florida, so that is proof of concept. It is enough to tell me that if everything goes right, you can win this game. But when you lose to Utah, I begin to reflect because Utah was supposed to be the get right game. And now all I can do is focus my mind on what's wrong. So when you lose to Utah, I start thinking about the game versus Kansas. Because in between or on the outsides of those 2 games against Arizona and BYU, you had your game versus Utah that we're focusing on, and we also had to see the TCU choke job versus Kansas. So now I'm looking at both of those games under a lot of scrutiny because those were the games, or excuse me, that first game was the one that had you feeling like, oh, man, you just let this slip through your fingers. But then you start thinking about the fact that Punch had a good game. LT had a good game. Robinson had a good game. You start thinking about all the games, all the things that went right for the Frogs against Kansas until the end. So to bring back where this started, is it the fact that if everything goes right for TCU, they can beat these teams? Because I certainly feel like 85% of things went right. And then when the 15 kicked in against Kansas, that's when you lost the game. That's when you choked it away. That's when you got walked down in regulation and then beat up in overtime. Like, this is what happened in this game. And it makes me wonder, did everything go right for them? Is that the absolute ceiling? Is the ceiling getting up large on a top 25 team, but then getting walked down? It was supposed to be a 3-game stretch for TCU. It was supposed to be Kansas, Arizona, BYU. And if you just take those 3 games and you end up beating Utah, I think we look at this whole situation a lot differently because you had a lead on Kansas, and I feel like you started to get that sour taste out of your mouth in Arizona. Then you get that sour taste out of your mouth in BYU. And despite the fact that they were losses, you were closer than anyone expected you to be. So now that's 2 back-to-back games against even better opponents than Kansas that you feel like you are more competitive than you should have been. That's 2 games in a row where you feel like you exceeded expectations. And in this game versus Utah, oh my gosh, the way that you failed to measure up to expectations. If we're just going to say expectations is a net 0, I would say versus Arizona, you are probably a +3, +4. Similar for the BYU game, you pushed them both farther in the game than you expected. They pulled away, yes, but that game was closer later than many people thought it would be. So let's say that's a +3, +4 for those 2 matchups. Versus Utah, you had a -5. And I don't know what it is about TCU and Utah this year that they just can't beat them on the court. I don't know what that's about. But this is not the type of game that you saw from the women. I felt like I was disappointed. This time, I feel embarrassed. I was disappointed because the women lost in a game where their where their defense wasn't up to par. And that is a standout trait for them. So I was disappointed in that aspect. I was disappointed in how you lost, but it wasn't embarrassing. When you look at this game, though, Utah didn't beat anybody in the Big 12 until this game. See, you lost 3 in a row. And then we came on here and said, you need to win 3 in a row. You need to beat Utah, Oklahoma State, Baylor, and then come to Houston. And all right, maybe you lose that game. But where TCU stands now is they are 1-4 in conference play. They're 1 game away from being the last seed, right? Because they're 1-4. I think it's 2-3 other teams that are 1-4. And then Kansas State is 0-5. They're 0-5. But all in all, what you did against Utah was embarrassing. This was the moment where you had to go run on a stretch. You played all your tough games. Not all of them, but you played tough games and you lost all 3. That's fine. But when you get the opportunity to play against easier competition, and I should put air quotes on that, but you get to play against easier competition, you're supposed to take advantage. And when you don't, I must question, can you? When you play easier competition, right? If you're taking in totality, hey, those are tough matchups. You're not as good as those teams. You're overshooting. I get it, and I accept it. But that's why I say be careful how much stock that you put into a moral victory. I'm not telling you not to take them because the way you win, the way you lose does shape the way that we speak about a team. So with TCU coming into that game versus Arizona, Kansas, and BYU, and having close matchups, closer than many people expected, the way you lost does shape how we talk about you. The way you lost to Kansas was a choke job. It shaped the way we talk about you. All wins and losses are not created equally. They all go into the win-loss column the same. But people who say, hey, ain't no such thing as an ugly win, I hope that you have a lot of pretty wins to cover up that other ugly win. Right? Because then it's like if you're 13-0 and then the 14th game you won ugly, no one's saying anything to you. But if you are a team that is, 4-10, no. If you're a team that is 7-7, ugly wins might not be the best. If you're a fringe playoff team, ugly wins might not be the best because now you start thinking about how do you stack up against the top dogs. How do you stack up against the top dogs? The reason I laugh is because that's the conversation that we were having about TCU. Losing to Utah tells me you don't need to have those conversations. And I say that with the utmost clarity, utmost respect. TCU has eliminated themselves from that conversation. Like I said, this is not a concrete indication that TCU is closer to Utah than they are the top tier teams, but it certainly feels that way. Because now I look at this game or this 4-game stretch in totality. Choke job, closer than expected, lost to a team we all expected you to beat. That's 4 losses in a row. 4 games you were in. You didn't score the first 6 minutes. After they lost those 3 games to top 25 teams, we excused it, said those were all teams that probably should have beaten you. But you go against Utah and you got to win. They ain't beat nobody yet. And you go out in the first 6 minutes and you don't score a single point. Not a free throw, not a layup, not an off the glass bank shot, not any lucky just, oh man, you just happen to get fouled and knock down 1 free throw. TCU went into a game where we all felt like they should get right. And they went scoreless for 6 minutes. Got a good look on a 3-pointer to tie the game up in regulation and send it to OT. You just didn't make that. It is what it is. But you should not have been in that position. I'm not saying you got to beat Utah by 15. What I'm saying is you should not be in a situation against Utah where you're playing catch up the entire game. You should not be in a situation with Utah, who had not beaten anybody in the Big 12 all year long, where you need a 3-pointer with 2 seconds left. You never led. You played a game against Utah. I was going to say who's played Utah and didn't lead at any point, but Utah has lost every single game. So everybody has led at some point. Everyone has led at the point. TCU didn't lead at any point versus Utah. Disappointing, embarrassing, revealing. I think all 3 of those words are extremely accurate adjectives to describe the performance that TCU put on against Utah. Yes, they'll go up against Oklahoma State, and at the end of today's show, I'll talk about why that is such a pivotal matchup for TCU. But let's move over to the women's side of it, because this is way more celebratory, I guess. This is a higher ceiling team for sure. We're going to talk about one thing that could keep them from knocking off Ohio State in today's game in 11 o'clock Central. If you're listening after this, maybe the game's already happened. Who knows? But they are on at 11 a.m. Central time on MLK Classic. Let's continue as we roll with today's episode of Locked on Horned Frogs. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. The college football playoff is here for one day only. It's the last night of the game, 6:30 Central Standard Time. You will see Miami versus Indiana. And who do you think is going to win that game? Feel confident enough to make a little bit of money on it? I tell you what, I love FanDuel because right now every college football playoff game day has a profit boost waiting in the app for any FanDuel user. Today, I'm talking about today, Monday. Here's why I love about the profit boost, because I already feel good about my pick. I'm already riding with a favorite, and now I get to make a little bit of extra, or I get to build a parlay around players and moments that I think will decide the game. This is like heaven for me. FanDuel is the best place to get into the action all playoff long. So visit FanDuel.com to get your college football playoff profit boost every game day. As we continue rolling on today's episode of Locked on Horned Frogs, I appreciate you for making this your first listen of the day every day. Make sure you're joining the Everydayer Club. You're already tuning in every single day, Monday through Friday. Sometimes we have 2 episodes. But what if you want to be a part of the show? Not just a listener, but a part of the show. That can only be achieved through the Everydayer Club, in which we talk. We have Discord. We have all these things. I want to start having live group chats throughout every single TCU football, basketball, baseball, all of the games. But I need you to tune in. $5 a month with the Everydayer Club. Content you're not going to want to miss out on, and it's more than the daily episodes. So let's keep pushing. Let's keep pushing. TCU women's basketball has to clean up the turnovers. They're going against a team in Ohio State who will feast on them if they do not. And this is a major game for the Frogs. You have to clean up the turnovers, and it's something that, in my opinion, I've noticed as a downfall of the team in recent games. Has it killed them? Has it bit them in the butt? Has it bit them in the butt? Yes. Has it killed them? No. Right? You look at the last 4 games, 16 turnovers, 17 turnovers, 24 turnovers, 16 turnovers. Like, that's not necessarily what you're used to seeing from them. You know, like on the season, TCU has been a very consistent team. Thought I had a sneeze in there, false alarm. But they've been a very consistent team, and they've been really good at holding on to the basketball. But I get it. you're now moving into college, or excuse me, conference period. And when you step into the conference period, well, that changes things because now you're going to have games where you have more mistakes. Conference changes everything because a lot of times high majors are not playing the most competitive teams in the out of conference. You sprinkle some in there every now and then. And it's funny because I was on the other side of this not that long ago. Doing Locked On HBCU. I remember where your numbers went up when you went into conference play because you were no longer playing these high majors. But now I'm on the other side of the coin where, of course, you're going to score a little less now. You're going to hold teams to a little bit less. You're going to make more mistakes. So I allow that. But the mistakes have been stagnating the TCU offense. And you look at the game versus West Virginia, in which you had 24 turnovers. That made it extremely difficult. You had to come down to a Marta Suarez three-pointer to win the game with no time remaining. You look at a game like Oklahoma State where you had 16 turnovers. That's a team that's really talented. And they weren't going to let you, or you barely got past them. Like, yeah, you can beat other teams, but you're not about to play other teams. You're about to play Ohio State. You're about to play a top 15 team. You're about to play a team that if you continuously have mistakes is going to make you pay, even more than a West Virginia. But the similarities between West Virginia and Ohio State, they're right there. So let's talk about the ability, for the opponent to force turnovers. And not all turnovers are the same, but turnovers are turnovers, and they are losing the ball. Whether you walked, whether that's a steal, or a pass that was just thrown out of bounds. There was a period versus West Virginia where they just looked absolutely out of the game. Olivia Miles threw a pass from the backcourt into the front court and just missed her target. Things you're not used to seeing from her. She's so precise, but in that moment, she just missed. And I thought to myself, when's the last time I saw that? And with everything else going around, it just felt like everybody was a bit frazzled. 24 turnovers do that to you. 24 turnovers is, because that was only a game ago, it is a season high, but it's also very regular for what West Virginia did. I remember talking about this, saying, hey, look out for West Virginia. This team is legit. This team is scrappy. This is a team that may not be a top 25 team, but they're literally ranked number 26. They have the most votes of any team that is not in the top 25. I remember saying that, and I wasn't pointing the finger towards the ability to force turnovers, but you saw it early and you saw it often. And when TCU was unable to score points from basically the second half of the second quarter to the end of the game, that was the reason why. Things became difficult because you kept having offensive turnovers. You kept having miscues. It's not always about getting the ball stolen from you. West Virginia, right now, stands 11th in the country in turnovers forced. So when you look at them, they have 24.11 per game. That's 434 total turnovers in 18 games. Ohio State's not that far apart. Ohio State is 11th in the country. They're 14th in the country. And they have 23.44 turnovers per game. And that's on 422 total turnovers. This is a defensive strong suit for Ohio State that pairs against I'll say recent, because it's not a lot. This is an offensive or defensive strong suit versus a recent offensive struggle for TCU. And it's a matchup that if you do not win, you may not win the game. I don't want to come in and over dramatize. I don't want to come in and hype it up too far. But if you can't protect the ball against a team like Ohio State that has been prolific in forcing turnovers. By the way, they're 11th in the country with 13.4 steals per game. So that's not just miscues. That's steals that lead to transition, that leads to fast break points. That's different. That leads directly to points against you a lot of times. If you come in and you do not protect the ball, if you have 20 turnovers, again, it doesn't even have to be 24. But if TCU has 20 turnovers, has 19, 20, 18 turnovers, it's going to be very difficult to beat a team that is a top 25, top 15 team in the country. I've seen it. I don't even know if 17 is good enough. You get 17 turnovers, it might be difficult for you. I talked about how once you get into higher competition, naturally those mistakes tend to happen more. But what I do not want to be assumed is that TCU's safety with the ball was solely predicated upon playing low mid majors. They played North Carolina State. And I'm a big guy who says who you play is who you play. But when you play one of them, you better show it. You better show it when you play one of them. And they played North Carolina State. 13 turnovers in that game. Was that in the midst of this recent stretch? No. But what it does say is in a game as pivotal as that North Carolina State game was, and this is pivotal as well, you understood protect the stinking basketball. Protect it. If you were able to go 13 turnovers with them, you need to try to go 14, 15 because Ohio State's better at it. So maybe you get 15 turnovers, but you have to protect the ball. And when you do turn over the ball, because it's going to happen naturally, when you do turn over the ball, it's on you to now say, we got to get back. Because transition ball will absolutely swing a game. Let's move forward because this is a pivotal matchup. But the women are not alone. Right there next to them are the men who, for completely different reasons, find themselves embarking upon a pivotal matchup against an OSU. Not Ohio State, but Oklahoma State. Let's break down TCU versus OSU and TCU versus OSU as we continue with Locked On Horned Frogs. Today's episode is brought to you by TurboTax. Listen, I get it. You want to be in the off season. You want to be kicking back in Cancun with a drink in your hand. But sometimes tax season doesn't have to tax you. Tax season can feel like the off season. Listen and hear me good. It doesn't have to take over your life. This year, TurboTax is making it easier than ever to just hand off things and move on with your day. Maybe you can go record a podcast. I don't know. Not like we have enough of those. We got to come on to Locked On Horned Frogs, do the TurboTax, do an episode. Oh, they're not done yet? That's cool. I get you some extra for the Everydayer Club. Then boom, they're done. It's simple. It's easy. It's quick. It's effortless for me. So instead of spending hours trying to figure out forms, you can meet with a local TurboTax expert either in person or connect through online, and they'll handle everything from W-2s to self-employed forms and everything in between. So for a limited time, you can have your taxes done by a local TurboTax expert for just $150, all in if a TurboTax expert didn't file you last year. Just file by February 28th. Take your taxes off your plate, get back to your life, and visit turbotax.com/local to book your appointment today. As we're wrapping up today's episode of Locked On Horned Frogs, I appreciate you for making this your first listen of the day every day, making it all the way to segment 3. And I thank you 2 times for that. Thank you. Thank you. Now, there's not many things that TCU men's and women's basketball have in common. These are 2 teams that are on different trajectories right now. These are 2 teams that have different levels of success right now. These are 2 teams that have significantly different ceilings in 2025/2026 season. These are not the same ball clubs. The 2 things they share is their next game is against a team with the acronym OSU. And both of those games are pivotal. And that's where they stop because the reasons they're pivotal are drastically different and they're representative of the different spots that TCU is in on the men's and women's side. So on the men's side, I'm talking about the trajectory. But you look at the trajectory on the women's side, like we're up. Men, it feels like everybody's spiraling. It feels like you're crashing and burning. TCU men's basketball feels as if they are falling and they need something to grab onto. And that something has to be their game versus Oklahoma State. Because you're in the midst of a 4-game losing streak. And as I talked about earlier to open the show, those 4 games tell a real story. You choke in your first one. You're going up against a team that people don't expect you to beat. They probably just want you to be competitive. They're hoping you can beat them because they feel like you're capable of it. And when you're showing it, oh, see, I told you that's what TCU could be. Knock off a top 25 team. Big victory. Until you choke the freaking game away. Oh, sorry. I just like having fun. But then in the second game versus Arizona, you begin to redeem yourself. You play closer against the Wildcats than anybody expected. You come back against BYU the next game and you do the exact same thing. You play much closer than anybody expected. So now people aren't even really thinking about the Kansas game. Now they're saying, okay, they're good. They're solid. They're a team that can compete with these other guys. Then you lose to Utah. And everything begins to feel like a mirage. That game that was a choke job that you began to feel like was just an indication that they're close but not quite ready feels once again like the choke job it always was. The games versus Arizona, the games versus BYU feel like you went and gave them your best punch, and it wasn't enough. They might have got rocked. They might have stumbled, but you didn't even drop. You didn't even drop them. The ref didn't start counting down 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. They ain't do that. You got in a knockout drag slugfest with BYU, with Arizona. But what does it really mean? Because to me, it holds no weight when you get off of that tough 3-game stretch, get into a game with a team that had not beaten anybody in your conference, and you're their first win. It means nothing when you get into a game where it's like, okay, cool. You went through the tough part of your schedule. Now it's time to rack up the victories. And the first thing you do is go scoreless for 6 minutes straight. 6 minutes straight. Mind you, there's the thing in many places. We're going to stand up until they score a bucket. We're going to stand up until they score a bucket. You sitting here through TV timeouts, just standing, waiting. That's where you're at. So, yes, when I think that TCU is falling, looking for something to grab, it has to be the Oklahoma State game. Because if you drop to 1-5, conversations need to happen. You drop to 1-5, this whole idea that it's not concrete indication that you're closer to Utah than you are a top-tier team, the idea that you could be competitive, you're not going to drop off the face of the earth. You're not going to leave the Big 12 championship. But the idea that you are not a bottom-tier team becomes very difficult to fight because now you're losing to everybody. You're not just losing to the top dogs. It's one thing if you're just losing to the top, because then maybe you can firmly entrench yourself as a tier 2 team. You can't rock with the teams up there. You can't beat the teams up there, but you can give them a game. You can connect on some shots. Right now, you feel like the underdog. Right now, you feel like the guy who was a late entry. Right now, you feel like, oh, man, I took this game on or took this fight on 2-week notice. We're shocked at how good you performed. The days of shock, the day of competitiveness is over. You got to win. You got to win. And this game is pivotal to stop the fall, to stop the descent that I feel like TCU is right on right now on the men's side. As for the women, they're not trying to stop themselves from falling. They're trying to propel themselves even higher. They're coming into a game against Ohio State that has a quad 1 attached to it, right? So this is a quad 1 victory if you're able to pull it off, and that's going to change seeding when it comes to the NCAA tournament. That's going to change seeding when you're talking about being a automatic bid. Okay, but how high are we going to be as a seed? Quad 1 victories do that, and this is a big-time game versus a top 15 opponent. Just pure respect. You don't get many of these games. You're going to get them in the conference, right? Like maybe, depending on how high people climb. But you're going to get some top 25 games in the conference. But it's not every day that you're able to play a top 15 team that's not in your conference. That's what happens when you play in a tournament and you get Florida. TCU men's basketball took advantage of that one. That's what happens when you play North Carolina State again. You went into their house. You went into enemy territory and you won that game. Kept your poise. Now you go to Newark, New Jersey. That's a neutral site. And you get to play Ohio State. It's closer for them than it is for you, but it's a neutral site nonetheless. This is a massive opportunity to once again prove we are a top dog. We in net rankings are high. We in the polls are high, and we deserve every single piece of it. That to me is why this is a pivotal game. If you lose it, you lose it. It is what it is. But if you win, think about what it can do for you. Meanwhile, you lose this game against Oklahoma State. The descent just keeps going. The descent just keeps going. And we'll keep going, but I'll have to be back tomorrow. All right, this is it for today. In the meantime, in between time, always know that I do appreciate you. We'll be back tomorrow to talk about Gary Patterson, maybe returning to college football. Okay. In the meantime, in between time, until next time we're here to the family, take care, stay blessed. Peace.